The storm came quickly. One moment, the sea had been calm, rolling, breathing, alive, but gentle. Then, without much warning, the sky darkened, the wind howled, and the waves began to churn. The traveler gripped the sides of his small boat as it rocked beneath him. The water, once an open horizon stretching endlessly ahead, now clawed at the edges of his vessel, spilling over in cold, stinging bursts. He wasn't afraid, not yet. He had known storms were a part of the journey. He had expected rough waters at some point, but knowing a storm will come and being inside of one are two very different things. Waves struck hard from the side, tilting the boat sharply, forcing him off his seat and onto the floor of the boat. That was when he noticed the water was rising inside the boat. It pooled all around him, creeping higher and higher with every wave that crashed over the side. He had been so focused on keeping the boat pointed into the waves, on bracing himself against the wind, that he hadn't realized that his boat was starting to sink. Panic began to creep in. That is until something tumbled over near his feet. A bucket, rolling back and forth in the rising water. He blinked. Of course, he had been using the bucket as a seat, barely giving it a thought. But now, as the water levels rose, he saw it for what it was. A tool, a lifeline, a way through. Without hesitation, he grabbed the bucket and began to bail. Scoop after scoop, he threw the water back into the sea, refusing to let it claim his boat. The storm continued to roar, the waves still crashed, but as long as he kept bailing, he stayed afloat. He knew the storm wouldn't last forever, but he also knew something else. His bucket wasn't very large. It could only hold so much at a time. If the waves grew too big or the storm raged too long, there might be more water than he could throw back. He quickly realized he would have to be careful, choose his path wisely, and steer clear of the worst storms when he could. But for now, he had what he had, and for now, his bucket was enough. So he kept going. One scoop at a time, one breath at a time. As long as he did that, he would find his way through. This is So What, Who Cares? With Lora and me, Jeff Kolaski. We explore practical insights for an impractical mind. All right, so we're not alone in our little adventure today. It's not just Lora and I. Today, we brought my favorite person in the world, my wife, Niki, aka Bird.
Hello.
Welcome to the show.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Window of capacity.
Mm-hmm.
Those were the words that you sent me that we wanted to discuss today. Mm-hmm. And I had to look it up. So I did. Mm-hmm. Why don't you tell us instead of me just reading what like Google or something says? Yeah. What is that? Why is that important to this conversation? And when we dig into our own nervous system and our own capacity for what the world's throwing at us, and why is this terminology? Why is this something that you thought was important to bring fairly early on in our show?
Mm-hmm. Okay, so what you probably maybe you were guided towards this, but window of capacity comes from something called the window of tolerance by Dan Siegel. So the window of tolerance is this place, and the person I trained with, Jane Clapp, in Movement for Trauma Recovery, she refers to it as the window of capacity. Kind of for obvious reasons, because our window of tolerating feels very different than our window of capacity. So we're just
so it's less of a, because I can tolerate a lot more than what I would prefer to have on my plate, sort of thing. Is that?
Yeah. Okay. And he isn't teaching to tolerate more, but just the language of it was shifted. So in the window of capacity, what that means is our access. If we have full access to that self energy, our wise mind, our thinking mind, the mind that's engaged with our values, versus if we're in that place of fight, flight, or freeze. So I like stack my hands like a window's open or closed, right? And in the window of capacity, above is the fight, flight, and below is the freeze, if I have these two lines. Sometimes in different, states, let's say if you've experienced trauma, that window of capacity can sort of shrink. And when we start to resource and gather more of a connection to self, when we start to maybe go to therapy, find friends, we start to grow the window, maybe check in with some glimmers, this window grows. And the reason I wanted to bring it up is because a lot of times in trauma recovery or in this understanding of the human experience, there's a couple misunderstandings. One, we need to be calm all the time. And in the window of capacity doesn't mean you don't have difficult emotions. You can have emotions like anger, sadness, anxiety. That doesn't mean you're dysregulated.
Okay.
Right? If you can still access the self-soothe, offer yourself some compassion and curiosity, you're in your window of capacity.
So would it be fair to then to maybe refer, or just for the layman, I guess, as like a comfort zone? Is that?
Oh, I'm so happy you said that, because I wanted to talk about that too.
Okay.
Because there's some misunderstanding of comfort equals safety. I have to be comfortable in order to be safe, and that's not true. So no.
Guilty.
Yeah, everyone. I think everyone here is.
Yeah.
At least on this chair.
Yeah, like it's preferred. Like we prefer to feel comfortable, but that state of like we need to have some adrenaline. We need to have some get up. We need to do things that are really our non-desired list of things to do. And that means, some emotional states that come. That means sensations, feelings. So we have mistaken comfort for safety. And that's causing a lot of harm, in my perspective, in our culture. And it's not, I don't think that alone. I know that people are starting to talk about that as well.
Yeah. Take me back then to what is that window of capacity then? And why is that, I guess, so important to understand what that is? And I know a lot of the work that you do has to do with symbols. So is that what we're talking about, imagining like a window, or is it or just an understanding of what maybe that we're dealing with?
I would say it's not a symbol, but I do like it as a symbol, because sometimes the window is bigger and sometimes it shrinks.
And so, sorry to interrupt, but if it's bigger, does that mean our capacity for life's challenges, more emotions, more stuff,
dealing with the mind?
Okay.
Yes.
And then as it shrinks, so then I guess explain to me. You said flight is on top.
Yes, freeze
Am
in
I
the
looking
in the
to-
imagery of it. If you can imagine freeze or fawn on the bottom.
And
that's when we're in dysregulated states.
okay.
When
So
we go into
why
those
is the
states.
top and bottom important there?
So if you now imagine, here's the window that's, let's just say open. And if you, throughout the day, you kind of go up and down inside this window.
Okay.
If something happens where you peek out and you go into a state of fight flight, now you're outside the window. You don't have access to self energy or that wise mind. And it's not to say we won't go there. It's how quickly we get back inside that window of capacity. Can we come back? Can we co-regulate, self-soothe? Can we move into something so that it brings us back into the window of capacity so we can be with ourself?
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Our hat.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Where our hat is on, we're able to steer the ship.
Sure.
And it's not that chaotic
Right.
or shut down, checked out state.
Okay.
Yeah, I do feel like when you're outside that window of tolerance and you're back in that. Did I say tolerance?
You did, which is great too.
Yeah.
People say it is Dan Siegel's window of tolerance. It's just that my education is window of capacity. It's the same.
Totally
difference.
not what I meant to say, but when you're outside the window of capacity,
yes, same.
and you end up in that window of tolerance, then you are in that fight or flight mode and you don't have the capacity even for love, not just necessarily for the daily things when you're in your window of capacity in the ideal spot.
Yeah.
But you almost have a bigger capacity for even all of the good things.
Yeah, that's so important to talk about because we've talked about, I think this pendulum, because of the little squares and the social media stuff, like everyone wants to be in this place of like regulation, and that's really good. And we've grown like tolerance to things. But we forget to have we grown our capacity for joy? Mm-hmm. Have we grown our capacity for love? Right? Because that's really true too, because those sensations, feelings, emotions can also throw us out. Or if we're in dysregulated states,
They can help open that window a little bit.
that's true, right? Sometimes when we're in dysregulated states, fight, flight, or freeze, our priority is not aligning to love, it's survival.
Right.
Those are those states of survival.
And a lot of times, like, I think what you were alluding to, Bird, was that, like, those good feelings can sort of slip away, or at least maybe not slip away, but be less at the forefront because survival. Right?
Yeah, like more difficult to access when you're not in a
Window of capacity.
ideal window of capacity.
Right.
Yeah.
So how do you then, it's not a comfort zone because what you just mentioned is sometimes it doesn't necessarily equal comfortable.
Yeah.
So then how does a person know when they are outside of their, like, what are some signs that you can look for? How do you recognize what your window is at any given moment?
Yeah, I think we come back to that, like accessing self energy, or I'm able to be in a conversation. I'm able to be with the thing that's happening now, the present moment. It might be body sensation. It might be just where our mind is able to be, where our feet are. How do we know? I think more than the window of capacity, we know when we're outside those states.
Okay.
Right? So the fight, flight, freeze, or fawn, maybe that's more obvious, like, sweating, heart racing, mind racing.
Right. Is it always one of those things that will kind of tell us when we're out of there?
Like one of those body things?
Well, like fight, flight, freeze, fawn, are those like the telltale signs that, hey, I'm not?
Yes, because that's a different part of our brain. So those states take us into our survival brain, and not our wise mind. Right? There's states in which we go into where we're not accessing our shared values, the things we want to align with, our ability to process and think and make smart decisions.
So if we can maybe get a little vulnerable here, is there ways that we like how maybe specifically us in this room, let's say overwhelmed,
Yeah,
right?
that's a great
Feeling
one.
that things are too much. But I don't necessarily feel things like fight, flight, or freeze. Like sometimes it gets bad enough where it's that. But I would say that when I start feeling overwhelmed, just had a long day at work, I come home, there's something going on at home that doesn't feel great, or something's going on in my family or friends or something like that. And I just feel like, well, there's too much stuff coming at me right now. So I'm not necessarily going to fight that. I'm not necessarily going to flee from that. And I'm not necessarily going to just freeze. But I'm in it. I'm here. So am I still within my window of capacity there? Maybe just sitting on the windowsill?
Yeah, I like that. Yeah. I would say now we're talking about how long. So if you're in a state of overwhelm, the duration of that really matters. So if it's like, oh, I'm overwhelmed right now, and I can see I won't be overwhelmed, and this situation's going to change in maybe the next minute or 5 or even tomorrow. Or if I go take a bath, I'll be able to see that overwhelm isn't a permanent place. Right.
Okay. Yeah.
It's that, but if we stay in overwhelm, then that window starts to shrink. And now we're living in a window of capacity that's smaller, and our ability to work with the demands of living, of being in a body, right, becomes less and less. So, yes, overwhelm is a very interesting state because it absolutely takes us out of present moment. And there's a few ways in which we manage overwhelm as children. And one of those that makes a lot of sense is the fine. It's just fine. We'll just do it your way. People pleasing
Giving in
is a really great thing to do. It's one of the 3 things we do when we're overwhelmed. We'll just do it your way. You've done it, and that's a form of fawning.
Okay.
So in that way, overwhelm can really easily send us into, freeze or fawn.
The other thing that I was thinking about is just, shutting down, which I guess leads to the freeze, like it's just paralyzed. I know Niki and I have talked about this several times where it's like, I'm not necessarily feeling like I need to rage, or I'm not necessarily feeling like I need to, fight or leave, but I can't do anything. I can't even figure out what feels good to do in this time, and can I interrupt you? Checked out. Yeah. Go ahead.
That right there, like I can't even figure out what to do, is a great way of articulating that you are in a freeze response. So I have these chickens, and my sister-in-law's dog came over, and it's like one of those big, like floppy dogs, and it attacked a chicken. This is when my chickens were free range, and it attacked a chicken. Our dog is a bird dog and doesn't attack chickens. But interestingly, what did the chicken do? The kids are yelling. It looked dead. They were, the chicken's dead, the chicken's dead. And as soon as it died or was perceived as dead, what did the dog do? It left. I'm bored with you. The threat went away. A chicken, I walk over the chicken. It was playing dead. It got up, shook off its little feathers, and went back to its little, house. Yeah. And so it was like, oh, yeah. So very smart and didn't have a choice. It wasn't going to fight the dog. It was going to freeze. If you find yourself in a place of freeze, okay. So my survival brain is doing what it's meant to do, and that's to keep me alive. So a lot of times we'll, scroll and scroll and scroll and scroll. I'm like, where did time go? Or we'll check out and take big windows of checking out. That's not bad. It's like how long we do it, how we feel access to ourself. Those are kind of like markers of like, I need to get back online with myself.
Do you think that, this being episode number 2, and this is what you wanted to bring up, is this more or less of a problem now because of modern things like social media and all of that? You mentioned scrolling and whatnot, work stress, all that. Do you think it's just a little bit, we're always going to find something to be stressed about? Or
I don't think we'll always find, I think we're wired to stay alive, and that a lot of things we're getting intel with will send us into dysregulated states, because we view a lot of things as the dog that's attacking us when we're not actually being attacked in the moment. That doesn't mean there's not threat. That doesn't mean there's not danger. It doesn't mean, but we don't want to deal with those things from a place of survival. We want to deal with it from our wise mind, which gives us access to a compassionate heart.
right.
So when we're in those states, so I can't really say yes or no,
Sure.
but I do think that technology is evolving faster than our brains. And so we're perceiving a lot of things very quickly. Again, it's not that there isn't, food,
Right.
shelter issues, and people aren't really suffering.
Right.
And I also feel like we're living in a time where we have so much more resources available to us. And sometimes because of that
Right.
element of internet and social media. So we do have access to resources that people before us did not have.
Right.
But when we're talking about window of capacity, it makes me think if you aren't in a state able to access those resources,
Right.
that might tell me personally that I'm outside my window of
Sure.
capacity if
Yeah.
I no longer can access those resources
Yeah.
for a
Yeah.
long period of time.
Yeah.
And it's interesting to, Laura, you mentioned technology is advancing faster than our brains. And that's something I'd never really thought about before, because in my mind, I go, well, it's human brains that are creating this, and it's, but we're still, we've talked about this before, we're still in a place where my boss being upset with me because I didn't get a deadline still puts my brain into a feeling like there's a tiger coming after me to eat my throat.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
Well, that's not realistic.
No.
Even the worst case scenario would be I would get fired and I'd still have a place to live and food to eat, and, for a time until I couldn't pay my bills. But that's not what our gut does. And that's not what, so we're kind of getting off topic, but that's
No,
okay.
you're right. It's the neurochemicals send the responses. If there is a tiger,
Right.
everything in your body is getting the message that you need to fight, flight, or freeze.
Right.
And yet we still keep typing, and when it's very confusing and in prolonged things, we might end up with like anxiety.
Right.
Right. Or
And then to bring back to the social media
Yes.
thing, like now we have instantaneous access to every stress that everyone in the world is experiencing. Not just the people in our immediate vicinity, but the entire planet and beyond in some cases, where I can get on, and if my algorithm's quote unquote correct and wants me to see it, then I get to see everything that people are struggling with, and all these things that are scary, and all these natural disasters, and all these things that 100 years ago I wouldn't have had access to that. So I'm just dealing with what's right in front of me. But my brain is still in the past.
yeah.
At least my responses to those things. So I guess
Yeah.
when I say that, I guess I just mean it makes sense why those things affect us, because our brain sees that as these are all things that are happening immediately right now in front of me, and they're happening quickly.
And we don't have the tools to sit with those difficult things and have loving kindness or compassion practices. I'm having this memory right now of when I was younger and I got phone use of our landline. Like when my parents were like, you can answer the phone now, you're old enough, but let's practice. And they'd make me practice, hello, you've reached the McCarvels. And they'd be like, is your mom or dad there? No, they're not available right now. Can I take a message?
I remember those days.
And my mom would be like, do it again. I'm like, never say we're in the toilet. Never say we're not home.
Right.
It was like major practice to answer the phone. And now we're given things
We
like
barely
these
do that,
devices. We're not trained in how to deal with this much intel. It's not that we shouldn't be aware that they're suffering. It's that because that's not the reality, but
No.
it's how do we process, handle, where are our compassion practices in meeting the suffering, our own and others. So if we were given, and we'll talk, our podcast is about this. What are these tools? Before we pop into the tools and learn these processes, I think kind of having an understanding of our neurobiology is really important. Or else sometimes what happens is we think we're in meditative states and we're just frozen, right?
Wow.
Or people who love to be in meditative states, they're like, ooh, and it's like, okay, but actually your medicine would be like to get your heart rate up and be okay with high heart rate and a little more revving. Right? Do you follow what I'm saying?
Absolutely.
Yeah. So the medicine sometimes, or the tool may seem like, but that's not my preferred tool.
Yeah. What are some tools or techniques, I guess, that, and I know that we can go into this in other episodes, but just maybe something that you could bring to the table now, that practices that can help maybe widen our window of capacity or, however you want to answer that.
I think before we jump into like growing the window of capacity, it's first kind of noticing and tracking with a compassionate lens of how we're moving in and out of states. So we'll go back to overwhelm, is that if you find yourself like, oh man, I'm kind of shut down, I'm in overwhelm, it's more of like, then the second thought is like, oh, I can track that. Okay, I'm here. I notice that. It's like you noticing your states more than you being in the state is a great place to start. Like, oh, here's overwhelm or anxiety visiting. Okay. The second thing to do would be like, what else is here? And I wouldn't say to try that on when you're in a state of anxiety or overwhelm, but like right now, we could, by having dual awareness, we can move into that window of capacity. So if I said to you, can you sense someplace warm in your body right now?
I can.
Can you?
Sure.
You can find someplace warm. And sometimes, and I've worked with lots of people who can't sense their body. So if you're like, no, don't feel a thing, that's okay. I've got another idea.
Do you mean warm, like physically warm?
Yeah, like maybe under your arms or maybe behind your knee, your hat.
Yeah.
Yeah, so you got a place that's warm. Okay.
I just stopped sweating from setting up the gear. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so
warm.
there's the warm.
Yeah.
Easy. Okay, now can you access any place in your body that feels cool? Okay.
Yep.
So now we're seeing that there's a couple things happening. And now let your mind go back and forth. So go back to the warm. And now go to what's cool. Okay, so we're in...
I'm so sorry to laugh.
Yeah. Tell me. Tell me.
Do you know what I'm thinking?
I know exactly what you're thinking.
Oh,
no. All right, everyone check if you can pee, if you have to pee.
Pete Holmes, if you're listening, follow this podcast because Lora is amazing. Do you know Pete Holmes?
Of course. I love Pete Holmes.
Let's all check if we have to pee. What did we just do? Anyway, that's what it made me think of.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
And he's like, everybody just connected their thoughts down to their you-know-whats. What did we all just do?
Yeah. What is that? Anyway, I'm so sorry to just crack up in the middle.
That.
Yeah,
it's a great, so there it is, dual
Yeah.
awareness.
Right.
Yeah, that's so funny. Yeah, so we have dual awareness and that's a sensation, right?
Yeah.
So, I mean, if you wanted,
Warm,
we
thing,
could riff
cold,
off
and
that.
having to pee. Yeah.
Yeah, so there is multiple things happening at the same time. When you're in a survival state, the messaging you're getting is there's one thing happening, and that's you're going to die. So you better freeze, you better fawn, you better fight, or you better flight, because there's not multiple things happening.
Right.
You got it. And so if we could start to practice even dual awareness, without being in dysregulated states. And just through the day, what happens then is when we start to sort of dip down, we can go like, whoa, okay, so overwhelm's here, but also, okay, I can like feel my love for Niki. I can sort of remember a place in nature, right? So we're feeling multiple things.
So
that's one way.
Is that like grounding? Is that what that is? Is that like kind of getting yourself back to the real world and, well, or however you want to articulate that? Is that kind of what that's doing?
I mean, all of it's the real world. So,
Sure.
But I would say it could be, some people describe grounding like that, like grounding being like where your feet are. That's how I would describe grounding. It's like, are you in this present moment? Another
or
thing,
almost like self-awareness, but just on a deeper level, like where you're really checking in. I know that I've practiced that with you, where I'm just really checking in. What are all the things I'm feeling? Not just this one thing that my mind wants to center in on.
Yeah.
So just sensing all of the different feelings that are at the table.
Yes. So that helps to grow our window, or to even bring our window back in, or bring ourselves back into the window. Having it, and again, then there's some compassion that when the window is a little smaller, that maybe we can't do everything we did, right? Or if we're working like with our kiddos, and like there's a time when their window's a little smaller, so the demands are going to be a little different. Okay, now the window's a little bit bigger, and so there's ability maybe to do a few more chores and to have a more emotional conversation.
I want to know how I open that window up wide. That's what I want to figure out. I want to know, like, how do I do that? And that's probably something we can't just, you're not going to just be able to say, well, watch enough Netflix and you'll be fine.
Yeah, no. I mean, really, it is because so much of our window has to do with what's in the subconscious. It really does require some self-inquiry. Like where is the overwhelm origin story, right? Did it just start with like this job? Or has overwhelm been an emotion that you've been accessing for some time, right? Has this been something that's been around for a bit? And if it's been around for a bit, then who are you sitting with? Who are you convening with? What are you reading? How are you sort of checking with that part driving the bus? And that is how we open the window as adults in our life. We start to go like, whoa, is that thing that happened to me still keeping my window closed? And if so, I gotta go do something about that for me.
And do you feel like but do you feel like the awareness of that, having that ability to maybe just understand that that's what's happening in yourself, or view it in that way, or use those symbols as a way to sort of understand what's happening in your body and your brain? Do you think just the awareness of that itself can help?
I think it can massively help. I mean, I'm speaking to you directly when you're like, I want a bigger window.
Yeah. Okay.
And that way, then we're going to go back in time and do a little bit of, research.
Remodel.
But if I'm working with, kids or myself, and we're working at just gathering tools to grow our window, that's a bit different, right? I'm not going to tell a 9-year-old to, examine their life. Like, that's not it. But I will teach them how to be in the present moment, wiggle their toes, use their eyes to gather information, what's here now. I will teach how to be present.
So before we go, I do want to ask, how can others play a part in to support another person's struggle to stay within their window? Like, what part do others play in that, if any?
Oh my gosh. I mean, we're wired, like it's in our tissues to be together, right? We're communal. And so settled bodies settle bodies. Right.
I like that.
Yeah. So that doesn't, again, mean checked out, because checked out does not feel settled when you're with someone who's checked out. It feels checked out. But a settled present body will settle bodies. And there's loads of beautiful stories about that, of people who've been in chaotic moments, and a settled body will settle the chaos to make a wise decision. So just in that way, it takes us into co-regulation.
For me, what I've found is a lot of times just like reassuring words, things like that, can go a long way. I know that's for me personally. My wife's very good at that. Not forcing, but coaxing me or giving me an opportunity to talk through things, to bring it out into the open, and not just try to, not to go too deep into this, but sometimes my default, I guess, is to, if I'm stressed about something, is to want to keep it to myself, because I don't need that, piling on to her back as well. But sometimes that shared, experience, I think is very helpful. Maybe if we can talk a little bit about what our own experience is about things that help get us back into that place.
I mean, I would say, if we talked about that a little bit, what you're speaking to is such a habit of that comes from overwhelm also, is that like, I got to do it myself, or like pulling out. And sharing is very intimate. Like, it actually grows intimacy. The misunderstanding is that it creates burden.
Right.
And this is, and I don't like to gender things, but this is, this tends to, in our culture with men, this idea of isolation, and I got to do it with myself. And it's like as if it would burden someone.
I should be able to take my burden and hers.
Yeah,
as
and that's
opposed to
so gross.
Right.
I mean, no offense.
No, I get it. I agree. It is the default though in my brain.
But it's not your brain. It's the water we swim in.
Sure.
It's the culture in which we were raised and how we raise boys. And it's that hyper toxic, I don't like to use that word, masculinity. That's like, you need to ride in on your horse and save her when she doesn't need saved.
Right.
One, and that is this, but that's the thing that we've given, the gender.
But I will say that's not only gender specific either, because I do know that we've even had conversations like, where you're like, I don't want to put my stuff on you, and that's like, I'd rather suffer alone kind of thing than bring down your, so.
Isn't that such a testimony to vulnerability?
Yeah.
It is so, I mean, that is being vulnerable and knowing you're going to survive, because that is, I mean, that, again, if we're going back to survival, vulnerability is like, we're upright animals walking with our organs exposed. Right. Like, we're like, I mean, this is a very vulnerable thing, being a human. And then to say, I have these things, and can you look at them with me?
I'm trusting you with this.
And while we're all carrying the weight of the world similarly together, we're all seeing all of the same things and the same sufferings. It does feel hard to want to burden anybody, even though it can be such a great medicine at the same time. Can you hold this for me?
Right.
Or with me, or witness it.
Yeah.
I know, but that's what that is communal living. That is the thing we're missing. Where, the thing with our culture, with our devices becoming, we're so connected and yet so lonely, like the illness of lonely right now, and isolation. Like, it's never been reported as high as it is right now, isolation and loneliness. And I do think that that's part of it, right? And it's met first in our homes, like that place, that's, we want to make impact in our world. And I think in our homes is where we got to go get our get our stuff together and like, oh man, sharing this is not a burden. It's love.
Yeah, for sure. And I feel like that co-regulation and that
Connection.
just speaking vulnerably in the room is, you know, that those moments when you have been there with me through anxiety and you've played music for me or you've just hugged me, that will calm me 10 times faster than me attempting to
do it,
solve it on my own. So I just feel like other humans can stretch that window of capacity and get you back to a ideal mind zone, I guess.
Yeah.
I don't know what
Or
word to
into
use
your
for
window
that.
of
sometimes
capacity,
they
right?
call it like your wise mind, right?
Yeah.
But it's the heart mind, right? It's this thing of here that we're connecting back to.
Yeah.
Yeah, so stay tuned for next episode when we start talking about co-regulation and things like that. So, because that's what we're talking about next.
Oh, yeah. Well, perfect.
Yeah, perfect segue. Before we go, I know I've said that once already, but someone's feeling like their window of capacity is very small that's listening right now. What's something hopeful that you would tell them? Something that they could do or try or attempt right now that could give them a little bit of hope about how that's feeling for them.
So if the window of capacity is feeling small right now and you're looking for something to do right now, something very simple would be to toss and catch a ball or roll up a pair of socks and catch a pair of socks. We can't perseverate or have an anxiety attack if we're like also catching a ball.
Wow.
Goes to Walmart after this and buys a ball.
I mean, we can have sensation,
Sure.
but like when I worked at a nonprofit with kiddos who are being thrown into dysregulated states or coming in dysregulated, and for very valid reasons, I had so many little balls on me. I'd be just and not talking, not having a conversation, just roll a ball, and that quick they would stop crying. Roll a ball, roll a ball. It puts us into the present moment. You can't.
Yeah.
You got to open your eyes and catch the thing coming at you, and then you're in the present moment. And those little moments will help to open the window. If we wanted to go a little bit more into it, we would look at like, well, what are some glimmers? What are things that make me feel those the sense of joy, hope, love? Are there things I can do? Step out in nature, look at the clouds, feel the tree, touch the ground. These are things
Put yourself into that nature space that we talked about before.
And some people are like, ugh, nature, bugs. Okay, lots of other things we can do to increase our awareness to the present moment. And then increase our awareness. When we started the podcast, you said like our capacity, like when we're in those dysregulated states, we can't even feel into love. It's like, okay, so what are my glimmers? What are things that bring me into the window of capacity?
Right.
Do I have a list? Read a book, Okay. I need to go read my book and grow it.
Yeah. And I think you've even like taught me before that sometimes you actually need to move your body. You might think that you need to sit still, but you might need to actually move and get those feelings and energy out.
Yeah.
And that was mind-blowing for me because I want to just be a little turtle when I'm stressed.
I know.
Or when I'm
and I want to tell you to
dysregulated.
go lift weights.
Right.
Because we need to be able to have the capacity to hold stuff.
Yeah.
Like physically heavy things. And if we wanted, this doesn't allow for that.
Yeah. And sometimes that's what widens my window of capacity is.
The movement.
I don't need meditation right now. I need to move.
Yeah.
And that is my meditation.
Oh, thank you. That is absolutely true. Yeah. Dance, sing. I think this month, most people I've worked with have been like, are you singing? Are you singing? You need to sing. Because that.
You want to sing on the podcast?
No, I'm not asking people to sing and have it recorded, but I do think like using our vocal cords and just singing out widens our window.
Well, stay with us as we continue on this journey together. We will be back next week for another episode. Bird might even come with us. Who knows? She might be here wearing the exact same thing, just like I am and Lora is. And yeah. So anyway, this has been So What? Who cares? No, who cares?
Who cares?
I care.
I care.
Me too.
All right. Exhausted, the traveler set the bucket down beside him. His hands still damp and wrinkled. His captain's hat soaked all the way through, and he watched the last of the water swirling at his feet. The storm had been more than he wanted, but not more than he could handle. At least not this time. He knew that his bucket, his capacity, would always set the limit. Some storms would be too much and he'd have to steer clear when he could, but for the ones he couldn't avoid, he had a way through, one scoop at a time.